Hello friends, this is going to be kind of a neat episode. It'll be the first of its kind on the channel. Special thanks to the Telegram community friend who participated in this discussion with me for this episode. This episode is kind of almost like a free flow guidance session, just to give somebody a little bit of an example of what's going on, what's involved for those of you that are considering it. If you are considering it, you can contact me. My email's in the description. If you're interested in joining the Telegram community, or which this member that interviewed me is a part of, or some of our other social media communities, you can find the links for those in the description. This is very raw. I wasn't trying to be perfect. Again, focus on the message over the messenger and the way the message is conveyed. Try to receive the substance of the message. And you'll probably enjoy this channel a lot more if you learn to do that. All right, bless you, my friend. We'll talk soon.
So yeah, man, like I was saying, you know, you've been killing it with the videos. You've been doing really good, but personally, since the listeners are on, I'll say that if you guys think the videos are good, it's even better in person, because I think it's just easier to talk to somebody, but especially you, and to get that energetic exchange.
Thanks, Matt. I get, I know exactly what you're talking about. You get that instant feedback too, where you can have the conversation, let it flow. This in essence would be kind of what a guidance session would look like, how you and I have chatted in the past anyways, right?
Right. So yeah, I'll be honest, I didn't have too much time to prep the questions, but I did write some of them down. Some of these questions, I think you've already made videos on them, but I guess I'd go ahead, or you're going to, they're in the queue, but I guess I'd go ahead and ask some of them just to see.
Just do what you want to do, man. Just do what's on the top of your head too. You don't have to prep for these, really, you know. You could discuss the way that we normally discuss. There's no pressure, no expectations.
Yeah, I'll just come from the heart, man.
Yeah, bud.
As always.
That way you're more in tune too. You'll get your own answers with spirit.
Absolutely. But yeah, so
Raise
I guess the first question I'll ask is why does the ego hop from desire to desire, or attachment to attachment? So I'll give a little bit of an explanation on what I mean. So I'm sure you've heard, as well as maybe some of the viewers, how, or experience when you quit an addiction. Say it's something like smoking. Typically when smokers quit, they want to eat more. Or if you quit drinking coffee, or you quit taking pills, you might hop to another type of drug. I've noticed that in me, as far as when I start to let go of certain things, my ego's like, it's finally gotten rid of a certain bad habit. It wants to latch on to something else, and the cycle, it seems, repeats over and over again. So what would be the cure to that, to end it once and for all, instead of just making your ego bounce around from place to place?
Yeah. I did do a video on this. I might not have released it yet, and I'll touch on it again. But when you're phrasing it that way, it's making me aware that there's something that I didn't express in the video, and that was when we quit smoking, we eat more. When we adjust our food diets or our food habits or our lifestyle, then we find some other expression we latch onto. And part of the reason we're doing that is because those are tools of self-medicating. It's numbing us from this mind. It's numbing the mind. It's numbing the ego. So if you are numbing the mind with cigarettes, and now all of a sudden you remove that tool to numb the mind and distract you from the ego's still there and present, and now you've removed the tool that you were using to numb it. So naturally you're going to be gravitating towards something else. And the funny thing is, it's only the ego that led you into the first thing that's going to lead you into the next thing. It's going to lead you into the next thing. It's going to lead you into the next thing anyways. That's just how it goes. How to get past that is all about learning to, and I don't know what videos have come out because I've got some in the queue here, but we're not trying to refine the ego ever. We're trying to refine our understanding of what is ego and what is us. So we're not trying to refine the ego so it doesn't smoke. We're not trying to refine the ego so it doesn't drink. We're not trying to refine the ego so it doesn't do cocaine. We're trying to refine our understanding of what the ego is so we can refine the ego right out of leading us. Refine the ego's interpretation out of us completely. And that's what self-awareness is. Your true self, being aware of your true self, being aware of consciousness rather than the ego suggesting a thought and you grabbing onto that, attaching to it, identifying with it, and just expressing and reacting and responding from it without the mindful surrender of it.
I see. So, is there ever a point where this sort of process almost ends and the ego finally calms down? I would guess it's enlightenment, but do enlightened people, for example, do you think they also have, the common sort of emotions we have, like anxiety, fear, restlessness, or once you become enlightened,
No.
that's the end of all of that?
No, and no, they don't have those. And the reason that I can say that with conviction is because through my own self-examination, introspection, I can see how I can refine those emotions out when I'm mindful myself. It's only a suggestion of the ego, and if you're not considering what the ego's saying, if you're not considering the limited, lacking limited, carnal-minded, earthly, physical, egoistic interpretation, if you're not considering that, you've got nothing pulling you in towards that emotion, those negative low vibration emotions. That's where surrender becomes paramount. Spirit's put in my mouth, paramount. Paramount, meaning this is your chief concern. In order to transcend it is to surrender the ego. And again, we're not trying to refine the ego ever. The ego isn't meant to be a tool of divinity so much that it is going to express God's love. However, it is a tool of divinity that's going to help you experience that contrast so that you can create the suffering which will inspire you to make other choices and find your way back to God and to divinity.
I see. So, I think I understand this, but just to clarify for the listeners, it sounds like you mentioned the word surrender.
Yeah.
So, this is all about surrendering. This is all about letting go, as opposed to trying to manifest necessarily. Because what you already are, all of these things that we're inherently chasing are what we already are innately. So all we have to do is begin to surrender everything that we are not, and we'll be left with, in the end, all that we are. So you can't surrender your existence, you can't surrender your beingness, you can't surrender your soul, you can't surrender true love, you can't surrender peace, but you can surrender all of the ego's distractions from those. So true, I don't know if I'll call it true, my interpretation of really deep, profound spiritual work is learning to refine those egoistic, carnal-minded expressions right out of awareness, and therefore you're not manifesting. If you're not listening to their thought and taking direction, you're not manifesting their expressions. You can't manifest anger without first identifying with the carnal mind's suggestion and thought of anger. It will never happen. It doesn't just come from nowhere. Creation is not chaotic and dysfunctional. Creation is perfect. Spirit's hammering at home. Creation's perfect. And it's validated if you can examine it within you as you. So I think that's a good segue into the next question. So you said creation is perfect. One of my questions I have here is, why is the default state of humanity not enlightened? And here's what I mean by that. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we spoke about this, and we spoke about how children, when they're born, right, they can see auras, angels, different things like that. So I'd say they're more pure than an adult, but see, as we grow up, right, lose that sense of pureness. And this seems to be, even if you're a quote-unquote good person, right? You do the right thing and you try to be honest, we still end up developing an ego. So why is it that this, I'll say maybe lack of consciousness is the default state of humanity, as opposed to just being, everyone's enlightened and they stay enlightened?
You kind of answered it already, because you were aware that children have that almost enlightened state. They can see auras, they can read energy, they can heal, they can see ghosts, much in the same way animals can. So we come from pure consciousness back into these bodies, and then our influences fill up our carnal mind, and we're taught to be earthly because that's what our earthly influences, that's what our cultural influences and our societal influences, that's how they understand the world, so that's what they project importance onto. And unless we're born into an enlightened family, which we probably wouldn't even choose as consciousness to come back into an enlightened family in the first place, because we wouldn't understand the value of it. Understand, tomorrow, comparing today and tomorrow for you is the same way that Spirit shows me to compare your previous life to this life. It's all a continuation. There's no accidents. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and be a completely different expression than you were today, because you're starting off today where you left off last night. And that's how the lives go. But we do come to this world pure, and you've recognized that. But it's our influence, it's our parents, it's our family, it's our friends, it's our school teachers, it's our culture, it's those people in our environment that are unaware and very carnal. Carnal is the tendency here, because people aren't already enlightened. We're still graduating. We're still evolving in consciousness, evolving towards our own consciousness. And this is just part of the progression.
So, I understand that, but I guess let me try to rephrase the question to get a little bit more accuracy. So I understand that when people are influenced, that's what leads to being unenlightened. But why isn't it that the vast majority of people, in other words, the culture, is that of enlightenment? So if you have billions of people in the world, right, there's only a very select few.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas there's plenty of people who might be good Muslims, good Christians, or just good people, but you have very few people who are enlightened. Like, enlightenment is not, it's not one of the defaults. Well, it is default in the sense that you're born into it, but
you're born with that purity. Yeah. Do you
have to go on a journey to become that way?
This is a journey, because we don't come here with that understanding of consciousness yet. That's why enlightenment, like even you understand enlightenment to be this, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of the end goal of physical life. Right? So we're always progressing towards that in all of our lives. A bird is progressing towards that. My bird is progressing towards that. My dogs are progressing towards that. I'm progressing towards that. You're progressing towards that. But we are only where we are currently in this moment. Examine how in your life previously, even in your current life that you're living, you now have an evolved state of consciousness, evolved state of awareness. See how your own progression happens. And that's only within this one lifetime. See how many people around you don't have that awareness. Right? So this is the evolutionary place. This isn't where we come when we're enlightened. This is where we come to transcend the carnal so that we achieve enlightenment. We achieve the identification with the spirit, with the consciousness, rather than with the carnal, the physical, the body, the earthly. But we're ebbing, we're flowing. We're ebbing, flowing. Yeah, we're coming in, we get a body, and the body breaks, or we consciously choose, okay, I'm done with this body, and I want to be something else. I want to experience something else. Maybe I want to be a bird. Maybe I'm done. Maybe I've transcended any attachment. Understand, that's the ego too. Maybe I've transcended all of the ego's attachments to physicality, and I'm done with this realm. You couldn't do that unless you're enlightened. Because the ego is always going to have an attachment otherwise. That's why enlightenment is what it is. To transcend this place is to transcend all the egoistic attachments to this place.
So, that's another good question I can ask. So when you become enlightened, you talk about transcending this plane. Does that mean transcending it as far as the attachments alone, or when you become enlightened to the highest degree, do you leave your body as well and just kind of flow out of here into the next realm, afterlife, whatever?
Spirits tell me you always have that choice. Even no different than when you're terminal diagnosed with cancer, a person can choose to accept that as a thought and a belief and manifest it, or they can actually choose to buck it and say, no, I'm going to heal it and manifest healing too. So you always conscious. That's one thing that I've heard before. Spirits validating in my mind right now is we choose when we're leaving. We choose when we're ready, so we can become enlightened in the while we're still in the physicality, and we've already achieved the goal. There's nothing really more to do. So we don't including leaving the body. There's nothing. We wouldn't be so attached to that expression. We wouldn't really be identifying with the body so much. So it wouldn't be a burden. It wouldn't be as much of a concern because we're always identifying with consciousness in an enlightened state. Of course, I'm not claiming I'm enlightened. This is my own examination of my own experience when I'm practicing things like a self-realization meditation. And I guess I'm kind of using a little bit of insights that I've received from some suggested enlightened teachers. But Spirit's validating what I'm saying there in those moments too, though.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because one of the things that came to my mind is not only my experience, but the experience of a lot of very successful Type A personalities, especially in the business world and politics.
Mm-hmm.
They are very, I'd say, attached to this world. Maybe not to everything, but like if I was watching a documentary. This is a bodybuilder, Dorian Yates. And he was talking about how he came up, in a traumatic sort of childhood, and he turned towards bodybuilding. And when he would work out, it was almost like a violence in him, like this sort of, I think for him, it was probably because he mentioned his father died, right? So he felt like he had to be the man. And it's like, they almost have this drive to succeed because it can be because of trauma, but also it's like they're attached to the world at the same time. So one thing I've noticed, like with my own fitness journey, is I've gone away from bodybuilding and I'm doing more powerlifting, strength training type of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
which I think has benefited me in some ways physically. But one of the downsides I've noted is when you become ambitious in a certain aspect of life, worldly, but perhaps even spiritually, but definitely with worldly pursuits, it can make you almost attached to this realm. So it's very tricky to be able to be successful as far as making money, being strong, good looking, and just having what you want in the material realm, but also being able to be on a high level spiritually to where you're not attached to these things. And it seems like there's a very fine line.
It's not as fine as you think, what Spirit's bringing to me right now, and just contemplate this. So to strive for, say, financial abundance, we think we have to be very carnal and very doing and very action-oriented in the carnal world, right? Is that how you kind of understand it?
To a degree.
That's how a lot of people are going to say it. You got to work hard, right? And people have the programs work hard. Now understand this. What happens when you meditate and you clear out you surrender all negative vibration, allowing your vibration just to innately become your innate expression of a high vibe? How do you think that would affect your abundance manifestation?
I think it would make you a lot more successful in certain ways.
It just brings it to you because you're not resisting it. It brings it to you. You're not in a state of pushing anything away because you're not thinking contradictory thoughts of doubt, of lack, of limitation. You're just in that space of grace. You know what I mean? When you talk about type A personality, that's just, to me, the way that I kind of interpret type A is just somebody who's very committed and driven. Now, what are you committed and driven by and towards? Are you driven by fear, or are you driven by love? Are you driven by carnal, or are you driven by spirit? So a type A committed person, of that type of person, understand to become enlightened, you need some of that determination. Not only to be enlightened, but to live a mindful, a fairly thorough mindful expression. You need that determination. You need that commitment. Otherwise, you're allowing the mind to be. You're tolerating. You're kind of being lazy, lackadaisical about the mind, and you're allowing that carnal mind to come in, think its thoughts, and create and manifest through your own lack of diligence.
Right. I think that's why I brought up the Dorian Yates example. And even like with very successful people like Michael Jordan, a lot of them, they don't talk about it too much, but if you press them, like what I found with a lot of successful people is they had trauma growing up in their life, especially like with the father figure, them not being there, so it kind of drove them to make up for what they didn't have, like not having power, authority, money, whatever it is. And I found most people are driven by that rather than happiness.
All that you're really saying there is anybody who's carnally identifying is going to be able to show you a trauma and a fear that motivated them, and that's what the carnal does, because that's how it interprets this world as lack and limitation and creates suffering. But just the same could be said by somebody who's spiritually aware, and they could say, Spirit guided me and provided the direction. So whether Michael Jordan did it out of fear because he carnally interpreted the situations in his life when he was young, doesn't surprise me. Most of our influencers are carnal anyways. It wouldn't surprise me in the least. But you can do the exact same thing and be driven and guided by Spirit. It's two different, and one's a way of doing it with fear and always looking back and having an inner resistance, and the other way is just expansive and peace and peace of mind, and you're supported and you're replenished and you're nurtured, and you got like a cheerleader, like you've got Spirit is its own ally. You know what I mean? You've got your team. You've got your team. So when you're carnal, you look at this world and you're trying to do it all yourself, because that's the interpretation. But when you are Spirit, you understand how you've got this just force that's supplying everything for you endlessly, so long as you align with it.
Right, because like a lot of people, I've heard this, which is kind of interesting, is you look at interviews of Michael Jordan, or even very successful people, but particularly with Michael Jordan, because I'm kind of a basketball fan. A lot of people mention how he has this fire in his eyes. So even people who are not very spiritually minded can see that this guy, he has the spiritual power to manifest his reality, as do we all, but he did it on a very high level. But
he just kept his mind straight, because understand, somebody who's trying to do what Michael Jordan's doing and is failing is also manifesting that too. So it's not like Michael Jordan's not more powerful because he's manifesting success. He's just keeping his mind straighter. He's more what he's doing is he's showing more mental deliberation. He's being more deliberate with his mindset in regards to success regarding that thing. But the person who's failing is doing the exact same thing. They're being deliberate with their mindset about manifesting, not succeeding. You'd see, if you could talk to the person who's trying what Michael Jordan's doing and is failing, and talk to Michael Jordan about his success, you'd see exactly, they'd be able to tell you, this person said, no, I didn't think I could do it. I had this doubt, If a person really knew how to ask them the questions about what their mind was doing in the moment, they'd be able to show you and validate that their mind was setting them up for failure.
interesting. So that means there's really not that much of a difference then between manifesting being the greatest of all time at basketball and being enlightened. It's pretty much the same. You're just focusing on something different.
Yeah. And at the same time, there's not, you can use that comparison between enlightenment and being the best basketball player in the world, and as well, the worst basketball player in the world. Because all three of them are what their conscious intent is. They're just, you got to persist in it. You got to persist in it. You got to be deliberate in it, because the ego is going to offer you doubt. The ego is going to offer you other suggestions that don't serve you to progressing. Do you think Michael Jordan listened to his ego when he said, I'm going to miss this shot? He wouldn't tolerate, did you say no way?
Yeah, he wouldn't accept missing a shot.
Exactly. It all starts in the mind. All the manifestation begins in the mind. We're not talking about Michael Jordan's thumb. We're not talking about his shoes. We're not talking about number 23. We're talking about his mind, because that's the catalyst for his expression.
Interesting. Yeah, I never saw it that way, but I suppose it's true. It's just about focusing intensely on what you want.
Examine your own experience. Examine your own experience. With sufficient examination, you'll prove it. It'll be validated. That's an absolute truth. That's an absolute truth. A sad thought will create sadness 100% of the time. A happy thought will create happiness 100% of the time. There's no chaos. There's no dysfunction in thought. And you can do the same with basketball. You can do the same with, you are a creator. This piece of divinity in you has this expression and this innate ability to manifest. That's what it does. That's why you can understand these things so clearly. That's why you can understand other people so clearly once you understand it experientially in yourself. Once you know it yourself, you can Spirit's saying, extrapolate it onto all of creation. This doesn't just work for me and not work for you, or just work for you and not for me. This is how it works.
So that leads to the next question. You were talking about, I think this was a while back, about mental momentum, and how your manifestations in large part have to do with how much energy you're putting behind them. So one thing I was thinking about is, let's say somebody has been very negative for years and they're trying to turn things around instantaneously. Is there a way to overcome years of negative thinking or negative resistant energy in an instant and produce an energy, like, let's say negative energy is worth like 100 points that you've been accumulating? Could you make your positive energy like 1,000 points instantly?
Yeah. So there's what Spirit's saying. If you're you ever see somebody crying and their friend's trying to cheer them up and they're so sad, and their friend's like, don't laugh, don't smile. And as soon as they get that thought about laughing and smiling, they break the momentum that they'd been taking into that moment of sadness, and now they break into happiness. It's that quick. Now here's the trick. When we already have that negative vibration, mental momentum of the sadness built up, that energy is still, it doesn't go away instantaneously. It has to come down while we stop fueling it. So, but it's still there. So what we can, if we think a happy thought for just 2 seconds and then return to the sad thought, the energy from the sadness is still elevated. So it's still kind of, the momentum is still there. But at any moment we can change, and then the momentum can start going in a different direction.
Because that brings up another thing, is like time. They say time is an illusion because you compare, like the way we tell time is we compare
concepts. It's conceptual. What time is a way that our carnal mind has created in order to, it's a concept so that we can define this earthly realm. That's why they say time is illusion, but it's useful for the carnal. But to spirit, it means nothing. In the spiritual realm, there's no tomorrow. There's no yesterday.
Everything's just happening right now. So change is technically instant then, if you decide to. Yes. If you're saying it in the way that I explained it, then yeah, I agree with that. If you're perceiving a different answer than I gave,
then maybe not. When you say everything's happening in this time, our awareness is right now. Your awareness is right here, right now. So that's why we say kind of time is an illusion. But the carnal mind here in the earth, we can still say, well, I got to work on Monday. When's a Monday? And the carnal mind has developed concepts so that it can work that out, so that it can use it.
Right. Yeah, like, I don't know when people created the concept of days of the week, but before then, there wasn't any such a thing. And like, even with that concept, like if you take a look at your past, right? I don't know, the past Monday, you were in the now. In the future, you're going to be in the now, and right now, we're in the now.
Yeah, what you are is always in the now. And you can look back with your conscious mind right now and think of last week right now. So you, okay. You like that?
It seems like the cure to everything, to be honest. It sounds like it's just being in the moment.
Well,
it's too simple to be true, almost.
It's not being in the moment. It's aligning with the self, which happens to be in this moment. Because a person can be very carnal in this moment, and that's not the answer to awareness. That's still creating suffering. I can go kick my dog right this moment. You know what I mean? That's a very carnal, disconnected interpretation of the best thing I could be doing right now. So you can interpret now through the carnal and still be very disconnected and create and manifest suffering. So now is just an expression, now is like a symptom of isness. You won't find isness by searching for what's now. Because the carnal mind can be there too in your mind. It can give you that interpretation right now.
It almost sounds like the whole goal of life then is to find the true you, not the ego, but what some people call it the soul, the spirit, consciousness. In the moment, because that can be tricky. Because if you're a carnal person, you might think it's your body. Or you might think it's your mind, but it's something beyond the body and the mind.
Well, the beauty of that is, no matter what you think it is, if you think it's something carnal, you're going to continue to create and manifest suffering and lack and limitation, which will kind of keep reminding you, this ain't it. So you can go as wrong as you want, as many times as you want, and you'll still get the reminders that this does not feel good. That there is suffering, and that suffering is innate of disconnect, and is designed to provide us inspiration to reconsider what we're doing and how we're doing things. The blessing, I guess, as Buddha said, once you heard of enlightenment, you'll never be satisfied with anything less. Something along those lines. That's me paraphrasing, and it makes sense because how many people even really know what enlightenment is? But once you understand that it's something that you can actually attain for peace, for happiness, for harmony, for self-discovery, it starts to get you to kind of ask questions in a different manner over time. You know what I mean? If there's something more that can be done to alleviate suffering, because suffering doesn't tend to get better as you deepen your carnal identification, it tends to get more and more dense. You almost can't get away. It almost blocks you into a corner where you have nowhere to turn but divinity.
And I think that's one of the main reasons I began on my journey. I suppose the same reason Buddha did, but in a different way. He pursued enlightenment because of suffering as well. And I don't know. I suppose it's like I asked my buddy one day, I asked him, I said, if you had everything in this world, all the money, the cars, the women, what would you do next? He said there's nothing to do next, and I agreed. I said the only thing left is to pursue God or consciousness, and that's kind of my main focus at this point. And the thing though is, when you try to tell people that, most people just don't, they don't resonate with it, I suppose, because that's just not, they're not ready for it.
They're a little bit too distracted to actually receive the substance of the question or the substance of the message. You know, they might say something like, "Oh, that's deep," you know, but they're dismissive of considering it. Jim Carrey said something along the lines of, "I wish everybody had money so they could see that's not the answer." And that's in essence what you're saying. You know, what would you do next if you had money? You had the house, you had the car. You know, where do you go next? Doesn't that validate how perfect creation is? You can perfect the carnal in, I guess, the interpretation that the carnal is able to be perceived as perfect, meaning you can have a successful carnal life, is what I'm really trying to say. And you'll still be empty, you'll still be lacking the substance that only that divine alignment provides.
And you know, one interesting thing I've noticed on my enlightenment journey is I'm noticing, as I'm raising my consciousness, more and more things are coming up from the past and the present even. And it's like you have to deal with all this stuff inside of you, the good and the bad. And that's something that I've been thinking about, is why is creation like this, where to become enlightened or to be, you know, perfected, you have to face all these things. You can't just, for instance, an emotion doesn't leave your body or your consciousness.
It can.
By ignoring it, it just stays.
Not by ignoring it, by surrendering it. When you have an emotion in your body, what keeps it in your body?
Resistance.
Where does the resistance come from?
Your own consciousness.
How about if I say the carnal mind's interpretation of the emotion in your body? Just so we're not blaming spirit for it. The carnal mind sees the emotion, the sensations of the emotion as negative, does it not? So it doesn't want to express it. So it suppresses it. And with that, it's expressing resistance. But if you don't listen to the carnal mind, you're not even resisting the energy. It can come up and it can integrate. But if you resist it in the mind by giving it a carnal-minded, negative interpretation of fear or pain or shame or guilt, then you're reaffirming that it's those negative things, which it's not, by the way. That's only the carnal mind's, that's the lack and limitation. That's how the carnal mind is creating the suffering. It's just a sensation. I do this in my feeling meditation. The carnal mind can suggest this is fear, this is pain, it's discomfort, it's such and such. It happened when I was whenever. All these stories are binding you to the suffering. And it's the stories of the mind. Surrender the mind and you have a different experience. As soon as you stop resisting in the mind, it can integrate on its own. It's the carnal mind that's holding it out. It's the carnal mind that's stagnating it and locking it away and suppressing it, binding it.
Yeah, because one of the things that hit me just now is a lot of philosophers I've noticed, I think Nietzsche was one of them, they say he killed himself, I think. He went crazy because I suppose he thought too much.
Philosophy, yeah.
It may have been because he had an STD. I think it was either herpes, syphilis, don't quote me on it.
Sure.
But, I've noticed a lot of people who think a lot, you know, many philosophers, they tend to go crazy, and I wonder if that's exactly what it is.
It's a validation. Oh, all you're doing, you're cultivating ego, cultivating ego, cultivating ego. It's funny because when I first got into this kind of self-work, self-realization type stuff, a friend of a friend called me a philosopher. And back then I didn't really know what it meant. But it's a thinker. That's how I'm interpreting it now. It's a thinker, and when you're thinking, you're resisting that intuitive spiritual connection. You're making the carnal mind's best logical interpretation God, in essence. You're saying this is the top of the top. So now a philosopher, to be a thinker, great thinker, no thank you. I know in my own personal experience, the thinking part of me is the least part of me. That's where the stresses come from. That's where the ignorance comes from. That's where the misunderstanding comes from. It's never from spirit. Spirit doesn't tell me to do anything unloving, doesn't tell me to do anything stressful. Intuition doesn't do any of that type of stuff. It's very clear. Just a person has to examine, and Jesus is saying this now. This is like the validation. This is why it's promoted to examine your own experience, because once you know these things experientially, it's undeniable. That's how it's validated. That's how it's proven.
It's interesting. I grew up a Muslim, and in Islam, the biggest sin is shirk, or associating partners with Allah or God.
What does that mean?
And so, in the past, I used to think that means, for instance, like around the Prophet Muhammad's time, they used to worship stones, they used to worship idols and things like that. And I thought, okay, if you're doing that, that's committing shirk. But my new understanding is, consciousness or spirit is God. So if you're looking to the outside world, as Neville would say, if you guys are familiar with Neville Goddard, or you're worshiping your thoughts as God, being a philosopher, or you basically give the credit to anything outside of your own consciousness or to God or spirit, that's shirk. But before I got into spirituality, that was not even, there's no way I would have understood that, but now I do.
Isn't that interesting? That book that came through recently, the 10 Days with Jesus, he talks about false idols in there in a way that I hadn't heard it said before. And what was kind of neat is, because it's very condemned in Christianity, false idols. And here's the thing about consciousness. You know what a placebo is, right? So a person could take a sugar pill and experience the same effects as a medication. And that's not the sugar pill doing that, that's their consciousness doing that. Your consciousness has the power to be projected onto anything and have the desired expression. However, the reason it's such a sin is because a person who's doing that doesn't understand that it's actually coming from you. That's why it's a sin. It's not coming from the rock. You're projecting your energy, you're projecting your power onto this rock. And you're manifesting that expression from what seems like the rock, but it's your consciousness that's doing it. And the reason it's considered a sin is because we're not understanding that we are the source. We're giving our power away.
Right. And it's interesting too, because, Prophet Muhammad, before he became a prophet, they say he used to spend his time in a cave in seclusion. And I always wondered, because they would say he was on the path of Abraham. He was following the same religion as Abraham, but I was always like, well, before the 5 prayers came, what exactly was he doing? And my understanding now is he was doing the same thing we're doing. He was going in and getting in touch with his consciousness, and that's what brought about the message.
Awesome.
And we've already spoken about this, but for the viewers,
that's a great point, by the way.
Thanks, man. A lot of these prophets, if you look at them, they spent most of their time alone, at least for short periods of time. They would be by themselves. They were farmers, shepherds. Some of them were outcasts. So it seems when you spend a lot of time alone, there's nothing left but consciousness. So you just
Well,
naturally get.
we talked about this before though. Um, it can be that way, but it also cannot be that way. You look at, I think we used, when you and I talked about it previously, we might have talked about people in prison. Not everybody who's in prison, comes out of solitary confinement enlightened. You still have to know, because what you're doing with your mind is what matters. So if you go into solitary confinement and you're just cycling the carnal mind and ego over and over again, over and over again, over and over again, but you're all alone, it's showing that being alone isn't the determining factor. The determining factor is how you're using that mind. And you're right, these examples of these people, these prophets that did these things and came and spread these profound messages and revelations, my understanding through my own experience, and Spirit's validated this previously, is they're cultivating stillness. Be still and know that I am. Still your being, that's in the Bible, and know that I am. So you're cultivating that awareness by stilling your being. You're not allowing your consciousness to be projected and stimulated externally. You're not allowing the mind to come up and distract you from stillness. You're stilling the mind, surrendering everything that comes up, and you just get into a deeper and deeper, more connected state where you experience your isness deeper and deeper and deeper. And when you experience it, you can speak about it with conviction, because now you know it rather than just knowing about it.
Right.
And that's the transformative part, is knowing it experientially. It's the experience that's transformative.
Yeah, because I know several times we've spoke about the same topics, but I'll speak to you again and again. Of course, me doing my own work and practice on the side, but then something will click and it'll be like, aha, I got it.
Mm-hmm.
The light bulb goes off. So a lot of it is about just gaining that experience. But just like what I was saying earlier, with most people, it's like you were saying, I guess they're distracted, but you can't rush enlightenment. It's just, it comes at its own time.
Comes at its perfect time, right?
Exactly.
It's not just chaotic and doesn't just show up tomorrow.
Right.
It's predetermined, meaning, it's funny when we say predetermined, because I don't really ever use that word. It's predetermined by the prior expression. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so usually I don't like to, well, that's kind of a lie. I do ask you a lot of questions about myself, but one of the things I'm starting to kind of move away from is asking other people for advice on my own personal life, and just kind of going more to spirit.
Love it.
Answers.
Love it.
But I have noticed with what I'm trying to do in my personal life as far as my career, and I don't want to give away too much personal information about myself, but let's just say it's a career that is very resistant. You can be spiritual, but it's not the most maybe conducive for this type of stuff.
It encourages resistance. Okay.
Right. Long story short, two or three people, I'll say two for sure, out of the people that I've met at we'll say my job, future job, is that they actually mentioned to me, they're like, I get a spiritual vibe off of you. You seem like a good guy or like a prophet. And I was like, what?
Mm-hmm.
It blew me away, but it was just a validation, because that's kind of what I'm trying to manifest. Not to say I'm trying to be like better than other people.
You don't have to try. Manifestation doesn't take effort and trying. You just be it. You be it in this moment, and you're expressing it and you're cultivating it. Right? So that's so exactly what you said though. Just by having that intention and that desire, that thought, and it's not just a single time. Look at the things you're learning about. What kind of people learn the things that you're learning about? You know what I mean? How do they tend to express themselves? Very profoundly, very powerfully. very in a manner where they offer so much substance because they've developed and cultivated it within themselves, right? Look at how much of the things you're filling your experience up with that is just like that. You can't be anything but, so long as that's what you're filling your experience up. You can't turn influence off. So what you put into your experience and what is in your experience is what you're influenced by. And that's basically showing you, for anybody who's really aware, that's showing you what the next steps are going to look like. It's showing you what's unfolding by what your influences are.
It is funny because we had a conversation a while back. You were asking me, what do you think about kind of doing the spiritual thing, similar to what you're doing. I was like, I don't feel qualified, blah, blah, blah. But to be honest with you, man, this actually just came to me now. Like that example I just told you about, it's a perfect unfolding. It's a validation.
Absolutely it is.
Of what's to come.
I see it in you, clear as day. But I guess maybe it's a little bit of me applying how I've gone and examined my own experience, and I know how these things actually work. I understand the truth of it. I understand the absolute truth of creation in that manner, that you can't, if you're learning all these things all day and that's what you're filling your mind up with, and thought precedes creation, it can only be that way. Now, if you stop doing this all today and you start doing something different tomorrow, you're kind of taking your foot off the pedal and you're creating mental momentum towards a different manifestation. But currently, you're filling your experience up and you're creating mental momentum in this direction. And look at it in your own understanding, how it's growing and growing. And look at how articulate you are to be able to express these teachings to people too. You know what I mean? You've got what it takes, and it's only going to deepen so long as you give it your attention and intention.
I appreciate that, brother. That means a lot. And I'd be interested to hear from the viewers too, what you guys think, But what's interesting is, I was bringing up Michael Jordan and success, and it's like I was saying, one of the things I've noticed in our society is we don't have a whole lot of examples of people who've reached the pinnacle of worldly success but are also enlightened. Some people may think Jim Carrey is. I'm not going to say if he is or isn't, but I'd like to be one of the first people to be, not only very successful in the world but also enlightened, to give people kind of an example. Because I feel like that's something I don't have, and I wish I had it. I'm sure many other people wish they did as well. So that's something I actually really wasn't even planning to do, but it just kind of came to me. If I can do that for others, I think I would.
What spirits bring into my mind, though, as you see these enlightened teachers, they lose their attachment to worldly things, right? When you look at how enlightenment works, it means basically releasing all attachments, right? That's the understanding of enlightenment, as you're transcended the carnal-minded attachments. It would be very difficult for somebody to continue to cultivate things at such an excessive carnal level if they weren't fueling it with the carnal mind.
By the way, that's interesting you mentioned that, because I think I forgot to mention this earlier. One of my fears in doing this work is exactly what you said. When you start to deepen into this, you stop being attached to your previous goals and lifestyle. So it's like, say you're making a lot of money and you're doing very well in your life with whatever goals you have, and then you become, maybe you do become enlightened, or maybe you don't, but you get close. Then all of a sudden, you get to such a high vibe that it's like you don't fit into that environment or that profession, and then you lose everything.
Well, if you're at that high of a place, you might become inconsiderate of the ego's interpretation of such things anymore anyways. What might become more important, here's the thing, as you touch consciousness more and more, you become it affirms that that is the way, that is the direction to kind of go. It kind of pulls you like a magnet. So as you become so connected in that state, you'll be less considerate of the carnal interpretations of these other things. It's like a trajectory. It's like a vortex. You touch it a little bit and it pulls you up. You touch it a little bit more, it pulls you up further. It's like sucking you. It's like a magnet. You can never get away from God. You can only deny it carnally. You know what I mean? And that's the direction we're kind of all going. It takes our resistance. We're being pulled magnetically is a way to do it, and our resistance is the only thing that kind of slows it up. Funny.
You know, it's interesting. A couple years ago, when I got into this, I began to become mindful and meditate on and off, but around 2016, and as I said previously, when you get into this work, a lot of things come up, so it was very uncomfortable for me, and I tried to shut it down. But one thing I've noticed back then, and especially now with my understanding, is you can never really shut it down. It's like once you see the light, you can never go back. And it can be a blessing and a curse, but I'm going to say it's mainly a blessing.
It's never a curse. It's just the ego's resistance might interpret it as such, right?
Right.
Yeah. Tell you what, go ahead.
I was going to say, like you said, it's always a blessing because it's what opens the door to you reaching higher and higher levels.
We need that suffering to catapult us. Otherwise, if there was no negative resistance in our experience, we wouldn't have the inspiration to get up and progress. You know, we'd all be playing Fortnite 24 hours a day. I'm going to close it here because my honey's got to cook something. Did you have anything to say in closing before I do?
That's all, brother. I appreciate talking to you, man.
Yeah.
And it was good.
Yeah, I think we'd provide some value here. I'm going to close the recording. Just hold the line here for a second and I'll talk to you just casually in a moment.